Be Frank Network. Content on this production is for entertainment and informational purposes only. It is not medical advice, nor is it intended to substitute medical treatment or diagnosis. Seek medical help if you believe that you are suffering from a mental illness or are a threat to yourself or others. By using any or all of the information provided, you do so at your own risk. Any application of the material is at the listener's discretion and is his or her sole responsibility.
Everybody, Doc Brian, and welcome to Doc Talks, where we talk about people's troubles, trials, tribulations, and hopefully triumphs of life. Today, we have with us the famous Pamela Price here. I wish you could see her face at this introduction, but Pamela, we're so glad to have you with us here today, and look forward to getting to know you a little bit better.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Me too.
So when I was sent your direction to see if you would be a guest on the show, I got to looking at all of these accolades of fighting stuff that you, not fighting, what is it, Ninja War that you do?
American Ninja Warrior.
Yeah. And so, I watched that stuff on TV and I'm like, I obviously could not do any of that. Some people are built for comfort and others for speed. So
you could do it. You could.
Yeah, I could. But I have no desire to. So we'll leave it.
I was just gonna say, the question is, do you want to?
That's right. Yeah, and I have no want to do any of that. So, Pamela, tell us, and I assume you go by Pamela. Is that okay to call you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Where were you born? Tell us a little bit about where you grew up.
I was born in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Small, Croatan, really, and that's where my parents had first met. My mom was an RN, registered nurse. My dad was doing his residency after coming back from medical school in Europe. And I have a sibling, one older sister who's 2 years older. And most of my Filipino family was there. Also, my father's parents were there. They both passed away now. But, there's a big Filipino community because of the Navy and the base there, which is my late grandfather, my late Lolo, Conrad, was a part of the Navy. So that's where I grew up. And then we moved at I would say I was about 8 years old when we moved to Maine, to Portland, Maine, Scarborough, Maine. And that, it was a safe place to grow up, and you could leave your door unlocked, and, there was no social media then. So it was like, life was a little bit simpler.
Absolutely. Do you think, as my mom says a lot, it just seems like the world is getting worse and worse? Do you think it's that it's really getting worse, or that we just have more access to what's going on everywhere?
I think we have more access, and we have more reporting and observing, and there's a camera on everything. So like if there was a man yielding sword, which is often something that happens here on Hollywood Boulevard over there, we didn't know that was happening in 1995 because nobody was shooting it and putting it on Instagram.
Right.
So I think it's a little bit of both too. I think like maybe all of the social media is like sort of a downfall as well, and the whole like, your superficiality, wanting to be something and appear to be something, but your life is actually not that. So there's a little bit of that, a little bit of everything.
Sure. So growing up in Maine at 8 years old, was it kind of a culture shock moving from Virginia Beach to Maine, or people generally about the same?
Yeah. I think for me, I wouldn't call it a struggle, but it's everybody's white in Maine, or was at least then. And the only really people with a diverse background was myself and my sister. If my father dropped us off or picked us up from school, people thought we were adopted because he's white. If they saw my mom, then they would assume we were either Chinese or Japanese, and that's it. Nothing else, just Chinese or Japanese. And then the only other, I think there were two guys who were twins. They were Black, African American, and they were adopted, and that was the most diversity I knew.
Right. So did you struggle with that in that school? Like, were you aware of it, or is it now that you're older, looking back, you're more aware of it?
I definitely was not aware of it at the time. I sort of split. Some of my high school years were in a public school, and then I was in an all-girls private Catholic school. I don't think so. I mean, my nicknames were always dumpling and sushi and fufu dumplings, and it was just a thing. And then when they started to come out with all these teen movies where there was a token black guy, the token Asian girl, or whatever, I became the token Asian, and it was a joke,
Mhm.
and I never took offense to it. Now I definitely am aware of the separation of culture
Sure.
for sure.
Sure. So, do you think growing up without that idea of this diversity helped shape you into an open-minded person when it comes to people who struggle with those diversity issues?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think that the way that I was raised also sort of created an open mind. We traveled a lot, went to Europe. I spent some time in Paris myself working there. And, my sister took on the whole, I'm going to go to grad school for Asian American studies. I'm going to embrace the Filipino culture, any Asian culture. She's married to a Vietnamese man. And she sort of saw me as the white kid, the kid that was really raised a Jewish white girl that didn't have much knowledge of my background at all.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, did you do okay in high school? Was there any struggles, any type of issues there? Good student, bad student, smoking in the girls' room, suspended,
Oh yeah.
all that kind of
Oh yeah.
stuff?
I was a popular kid. My sister was sort of like I don't know if you ever saw this MTV show. It was called Daria. So my sister was Daria. She was sort of like the nerdy, straight edge academic decathlon. And I was the popular girl that threw parties when my parents were out of town. And when I was a freshman, I hung out with the seniors, and I would gave me my first joint, and I smoked cigarettes really young. I was always at house parties. I mean, you're talking like 14, 15, 16 years old. And then, at a certain point, I was a part of this crew. I remember it was Binny, Caitlin, Ashley, and Pamela, and we were the girls. And then I transferred to private school after I had quite an interesting scene in my life that I wonder if I even remember all the details. And that was just, long story short, I was dating a guy he was also very popular. He was going to a basketball game that night. I would sing the national anthem at the basketball games. All my friends were going to be there, and my sister had told on me. She said that I was sneaking out at night and that I was doing all this bad stuff. And I came downstairs to go to the basketball game, and my dad said I was basically grounded for life and I needed to call my boyfriend and break up with him. And there was no questions, and I didn't really know how to defend myself anyway. I decided that was like the end of my world. I broke up with John McGinty, and and he kept calling the house, and I took a bottle of extra strength, like bigger than this, large Tylenol and iron pills, and I took them all. I took all of it. And I wrote letters to my girlfriends. I was like, I don't know what I said. I don't know what it was. And at this point it's a little blurry. I remember that my parents came upstairs and I was sort of like gagging, and my liver was failing. I had overdosed,
Mhm.
and I was secreting this, scent of iron, and they took me to the hospital. I think I almost lost my liver. I remember my dad saying, we might have been planning your funeral on this day. And that was all just because a 16-year-old girl thought her little life was over, you know. Can't imagine if I had social media what that would have been. And so coming back to school, I think there was a rumor that I was pregnant. I was still a virgin, but it was a rumor that I was pregnant. There was a rumor that all these things. And I just sort of got up, made the decision with my parents to go to an all girls school. And I met a great group of girls there who were really supportive. And I still sort of remained friends with the crew and still threw parties and stuff like that when my parents were out of town. But that was a really weird point in my life.
So, do you feel that that was a suicide attempt, or was it a attempt to just try to make everything stop?
I don't think I knew what it was.
Okay.
I don't think I knew. I don't think I even understood death or what it meant to commit suicide. I think I was trying to get attention, which is something that I still struggle with. Yeah, I'm always. I say this. I said this to somebody recently. I was going on a date actually, and I was like, I'm trying not to put on a show. Okay, that's the line for me for 2021. Try not to put on a show. And I was always trying to put on a show as a teen. Like even when I would go to the mall, I had to have my point shoes with me, show that I was a ballerina, or my soccer cleats or something that would show that I was busy doing something, and that might be impressive. And I think that doing that was sort of a way to get attention,
So identity was really big with you.
Yes.
Not necessarily identity as in heritage of where you come from, but of current standing.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So after that, you broke up with the love of your life at 16 years old.
I don't think it was the love of my life, but he was a good guy. But I would. Yeah, at the moment.
Yeah, and so well, the love of your life at that point at 16 years old, and then go to a all girls Catholic school. So I'm sure there was a big difference and change of pace from public school to all girls private Catholic school as well.
Huge change of pace.
So what is the most traumatic thing that you remember about private Catholic school?
Nothing. Honestly, hey, that's the dog. Nothing was traumatic about private Catholic school. This was a very special case because it was a small private school, not a lot of girls, great teachers. The nuns, the sisters they were nice. Of course, there was Sister Geraldine, may she rest in peace, was a little mean, but everybody, there was no popular. Like there was a little bit, and I sort of went into that crew of like, I became like the dramatic arts girl and would star in all their plays and whatever. But for the most part, everybody was just nice to each other. And it might have been the uniforms, we had uniforms. And so there was no judgment about what you were wearing or Abercrombie and Fitch or whatever,
right.
So there was absolutely nothing traumatic about it. And I was there for my junior and senior year.
And so good memories during that time, nothing
great.
Nothing just sticks out. Okay. So then you graduate from high school. Do you go to college? What does that look like?
My parents, I would spend my summers, if we weren't going to Europe, we would go to, I would go to a performing arts school in New York City. Sorry, not New York City, upstate New York. It was like a summer camp. There's a film about it actually called Camp. And it's a performing arts camp where you go and you audition and all this stuff. And I ended up running the dance department there eventually. My father and my mother wanted me to be an actor. I had my heart sort of set on like an Emerson, being a journalist of some kind. So I auditioned for a program, a small school called Marymount Manhattan in New York City. I got in on a scholarship and I was going to New York for acting. And I double majored and loved art history. And during that time in college, I took my summers and I would go to Paris, and I got like a writing job at a news site for expats that lived in Paris off of Craigslist. And that's how I sort of got into my own journalism route while I was doing, performing arts.
Okay. So within journalism, was there a specific kind of niche that you liked better?
Yeah, I loved cultural journalism. I mean, anything that had to do with, when I was writing for this site in Paris, I was writing about, the underground jazz clubs and the art exhibitions, the stuff that's sort of romantic, that Paris is romantic. Mm-hmm. So, the cafes and whatnot. And I was dabbling in creative writing and all of that, and I really enjoyed it.
So at that point in time of your life, what was your goal? What was the thing that you wanted to settle in doing?
I don't know if I knew. I think I was also like writing love stories and screenplays and stuff like that. So I think it was to be a writer of some kind. And to be a journalist of some kind, but always with the idea of making my mark, of making a mark so that people saw what I was doing, which is really incredible that I didn't grow up with social media, because I would have been a nightmare.
Yeah, you definitely would have caused some challenges to parents and other authoritative figures, I'm sure.
Yeah, sure.
In leaving your mark. So in that, at some point, you start teaching dance in New York City. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I was always, during this time, even in middle school and high school, I was always a dancer. I was studying ballet. I was in the Portland Ballet Company, and then from there, I got into contemporary dance and hip hop. And when I was going to college in New York, I would teach at the YMCA south of Houston, Soho, for the after kids school program, and I would teach at another dance studio in Hell's Kitchen, and that was, it was a great way to keep my creativeness. My I love dancing. I knew I would never be a professional dancer, but I was definitely good at being a teacher.
And teaching children keeps you on your toes very, very
Yes, it does.
much. But it also,
Yeah,
I think, keeps us creative too, because we see things that kids do that they don't even realize they're doing, and it sparks something inside of us.
I love it. I just taught a 5-year-old this morning. I teach her ballet on Zoom every Saturday, and I get so excited to see when she sort of makes her own corrections.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's rewarding,
Right.
very
So
rewarding.
you said you didn't see yourself as a professional dancer, but a dance teacher. What gave you the mindset that you probably wouldn't ever be a professional dancer?
My memory. um, I would go to auditions or I would go to classes, and I just couldn't memorize the choreography that fast. And I don't think I really admit that ever, but so I sort of began. I had a very strict dance mentor named Peanut Washington. And now, I'm sort of the not a strict teacher, but I am strict on knowing the choreography, which is funny because I might forget it right after I teach them. But
No
which
one
is why
has
I
to
teach it
know.
to them.
Nobody has to know.
Tell no one. No, they know. I always say, you remember that because I'm not going to remember it. Yeah, yeah.
So, just the thought of not being able to remember the choreography was your thought that you could never make this work.
Yeah, I think I knew I had the stage presence, of some kind, but I wasn't. I just wasn't. I wasn't going to be a prima ballerina. I love hip hop, and I've continued over while having my career, and building my athletic career. I've continued over time to have little small feats in dance. Like my one of my good friends is Steven Tyler's daughter, Chelsea Tyler, and she and her husband John Foster had a band called Kane Holler. So I would choreograph their music videos, and choreographed a couple of different things for different things that are on TV now. So it's like a hobby, I guess. It is
Mhm.
definitely a hobby.
So you talked about a little bit about your athletic career. Where does that kind of mingle together there between the dance and the athleticism?
In between, in middle school and high school, dance and cross country. Those are my two things: dance, cross country, track. And I was a long distance runner, and I enjoyed it a lot. I don't even know if I ever like won awards or podiumed when I was a teenager, but it didn't matter. I really liked it. And I always continued to run. I would run through New York City, just go for runs. It wasn't until actually, it's funny because my journalism connects to this. I run a news site called LATF USA, LATV Film, and it's a lifestyle news site. And a friend said to me in about 2016, "Have you ever heard of Tough Mudder?" And I was like, "What's that?" And he's like, "It's like this mud race where you do obstacles and you run, and then you get really muddy." And I was like, he's like, "You should do a story about it because you write fitness articles." And so I got in touch with Tough Mudder, and they said, "We'll support your team, your registration, get a team of 4 people, we'll support your gear with the Merrill sneakers and whatever." And I did. I got a guy who was a yogi, a hockey player, a woman who was a army vet, and myself, the dancer. And we trained together, and we did a bunch of like stories and stuff like that. Again, before Instagram was really getting popular. And we did the race. It was 8 miles, and I don't know, something like 24 obstacles, and I loved it. And I was like, "That's it. I'm going to do another one." And then I discovered Spartan, and I put myself into the elite race there like a couple months later, and I did horribly, and I failed horribly, and I did like 190 burpees, penalties, and then I joined a team, and I started to do well, find my niche.
So did you find you did better with a team than the competitions that you did by yourself?
No, because so when you run those Tough Mudders, those are called open waves where you're just doing it for fun. So there's no time or anything. You just sort of go and you do it. So then I started to compete on my own in age group, and I started to do well. I got third place at the USA OCR championships in my age group, and then I started to do well at other Spartan races. And I was scouted by an obstacle course team called Hardcore Performance. And then I started to sort of represent them at everything. I started to place first at trail races, and then find out that I love mountain running, and it sort of spiraled, if you can. It went up though into a really major thing, you know. And then eventually I was scouted for American Ninja Warrior, and the rest is sort of history.
So the day that you were scouted for American Ninja Warrior, that you knew it was final, that you would be on, what was that feeling like? What was that emotion there?
I was scouted in October 2018. I didn't know what I was doing. And then I got the call a couple weeks before they filmed the show in March of 2019. And I got the call in February. The feeling was awesome because my parents were there when I found out and all of that. But the knowledge was lacking, zero. I had no idea what it meant to be a ninja athlete, because it's a whole other world. Not a lot of people do, you know.
Right.
I'm a rock climber. I've been rock climbing for about 12 years or whatever. It's only in the past couple of years that I fell in love with free climbing. And so that world is a little bit like ninja, but still not at all. Like, there's actually a ninja league that's like, there's the MLB, the NBA, you know, the NFL. There's a ninja league, and that's a whole other world.
Wow. Yeah, I have no idea. I see these shows on TV and I'm going, I could never do that, or I would never want to do that. You know, those kind of things. But it is fun to watch how people have their own little rituals, you know, when they're doing the things. I saw, I think it was American Ninja Warrior, an episode where this guy went through the obstacle course in a tuxedo with tennis shoes.
Yeah. Like, at the end of the day, it's a TV show. So they want personalities. They want people that have a theme. And there are people that do it with suits on. My friend Anthony Porter is an archery. He's a professional bow and arrow archery guy. So he runs the course with the arrows, not his bow, but with the arrows. So he trains. I see him every Tuesday and Thursday night training. He trains with the bow and arrows in the back, so that he can do.
Wow.
It's wild.
So he's a modern day Zelda ninja warrior.
Yeah, he's Hawkeye. He's Hawkeye from Marvel. He is the real Hawkeye. It's nuts. It's really nuts.
Yeah. So in doing this, did your parents ever say, okay, Pamela, we understand that, yes, this is an acting position that is athletic, but this isn't really what we envisioned when we thought you should be an actor?
Yeah, isn't it interesting that I have parents that like wanted me to be an actor? They never said anything like, you know, I just told them when I moved out to LA, I was like, yeah, I'll try and go on some auditions and stuff. And that didn't really happen because I didn't really want to do it. I don't think it was until, and I'm not going to say that my parents weren't proud of me, but it wasn't until they saw me produce the show, an award show that I produced. And it wasn't even like after I interviewed all these celebrities and really became a journalist and was reviewing films and all this. It really wasn't until they saw the award show that I produced that they were like, "Oh, okay, our daughter is a businesswoman. She's behind the scenes and she likes it." You know, me just sort of being myself sort of got me the jobs in front of the camera. You know, I did KTLA news and stuff like that, and that was always very exciting for my dad. He just loved to see me on camera.
Well,
Yeah.
I noticed here that your energy kind of went down a little bit when we started talking about your parents and their expectations. Is there a little animosity there in that you don't feel like you're living up to their expectations for you?
No, I don't think there is. I don't know if I haven't really had the conversation about why we've never talked about it. We never talked about how I didn't say, I'm not an actor. I don't want to be an actor.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it happened once or twice, but I sort of went in when I moved to LA. I met my now mentor boss, Michelle Elizabeth, who really mentored me as a businesswoman. We started this news site together. She was also a journalist. Then she started this award show. I became a producer on it, and all that sort of happened. In that time, I don't think I've ever had a conversation with my parents about it. They always say, I'm proud of you and all that. Definitely, they've never kept me from doing anything I wanted. But yeah, I don't think it's been addressed.
Do you feel like that's something that needs to be addressed?
I don't think so, but I don't know. I think now with my dad, like he's lucid, he's okay, but I think it's sort of like, what does Pamela do? I mean, he knows. He comes to the show. I produced, this show that's like the Oscars of beauty, honors the people behind the scenes. He comes every year when it happens. And so he knows what I do. He sees me running around with celebrities and producing them and doing this and that. So it's probably the sports stuff that's a little more confusing.
Yeah, I would see how that kind of could say, okay, well, yeah, she's an actor, but she's an athletic actor. It's almost like, and please don't take this the wrong way, but it's almost like wrestling, like WWE. They're actors, but they are athletic people.
We're personalities. I think we're just public personalities. So we're really just ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, on the wrestling, that's incredible to me, by the way. I didn't know that was like a role playing thing until a few years ago. So it was incredible for me. I was like, wait a minute, we know, why are we cheering them on? We know they're winning. Yeah, it's yeah. I would say it's a personality thing.
Absolutely. And so I think that with the age gap sometimes between children and their parents, it's hard for them to understand that personality is acting in and of itself, because we are, myself, I am Brian Shepard. I am Dr. Brian Shepard, and my personality, if you will, is Doc Brian. It's part of me, but that's not all of me. And so I think that gets skewed even in the entertainment industry. And while this is a podcast and it's educational, it's still entertainment. I mean, so I would never say, hey, I want to be an entertainer. I'm not one of those people, not like, what is it? Ken Young, whoever he is, he was a medical doctor and turned comedian, very well-known comedian now. And I'm like, who spends $200,000 to go to medical school to become a comedian? Just one day decides, hey, this is what I'm going to do differently. And so we kind of get in this thought process of, am I really this person? Is this really what makes me happy? Or am I really trying to fit what I want to do into being my parents' idea of what I'm supposed to be? So do you feel like that you are doing this because you truly do enjoy it, or because you hang on to it because there's a little bit of part of you feels like you're living up to your parents' expectations of who you're supposed to be?
I actually don't think that it has anything to do with my parents' expectations, because I don't ever think about it. It's so, I'm very close with them. So I talk to them a lot, almost every day now. I think that it goes back to the whole like putting on a show thing. I think that I brag a lot. That sounds,
Is that a bad thing?
I don't know.
I don't think it is.
You don't want to talk about, yeah, but sometimes like I remember just sort of recognizing, getting off the phone, and I was like, oh, did I even ask how my parents were? I mean, now it is about them for me, as parents get older and whatnot. But it's also like they're the people I talk to and tell everything to. So, hey, this happened and this happened. I definitely do it because I love it. I love anything that is adrenaline, really, anything that really is sports related, except basketball.
I played basketball in 6th grade until I figured out it was a running sport, and I quit. I wasn't doing all that. I didn't understand why you had to run all the way to the other end of the court to do the same thing you just did at the opposite end of the court for the other team.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense.
I'd always just get hit in the face. I was like, wow, I really have like no hand-eye coordination. But yeah, I think I do all the fitness stuff, a lot of and competing because I when you're good at something or when you start getting accolades and stuff, you keep doing it, and also because I think it helps me physically and mentally for my health because I live with, with a rare autoimmune disease. And I like to think that it keeps me stronger, even though sometimes I hit a wall. Like right now, I'm basically in like a reset zone. But I definitely know I do that. It's like compensating for the weakness.
With a disease, though, like that, it means you're one in a million at least. So we already knew that you were a great performer, actor, dancer. And so now we have this side of you that's even here. So what kind of disease do you have, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, it's called Behçet's disease. Some people, my rheumatologist calls it Behçet. Um, but it's an autoimmune disease that was originally called the Silk Road disease, and that was, I think, originated in Japan, but having nothing to do with ethnicity because it doesn't discriminate, and it is inflammation of the blood vessels. People started to get ulcers on their eyes, and then it showed up in Turkey. The Behçet's is named after a Turkish doctor. It affects just about everything in the body. It can be neuro Behçet's, which can mask as multiple sclerosis. I was tested for MS last year, when sort of like the whole right side of my body was tingling and numb for a good few months. So I went through the whole MRI, and I don't have MS. And the worst for me is ulcers in the reproductive and the female organs and down there. That's the worst. And that's when I know my immune system has completely shut down. Yeah. And joint pain and all that.
If
Mhm.
I'm remembering correctly, they really don't know what causes it either. Is that right?
They have no idea. It
Right.
is the most bizarre disease because, and people are getting diagnosed with it more and more. I mean, there's only like, I think it's something like 20,000 cases a year in the US. But I know people all around the world, men, women, mostly a lot of men and women in their 20s and 30s get diagnosed and have their first flare, but they probably have had flares. Like I remember having GI issues when I was young, but I had my first flare in about 2006, and that was just the worst.
So in training with any autoimmune, when you start really putting a lot of stress on your body, tends to flare. So how do you cope with that in doing TV shows like Ninja Warrior or even in your beauty awards? How do you cope with that?
I think a lot of times when we're going through a stressful situation in which we have to perform in some sort of way, like even in the workplace, I feel like our body almost is like, we'll do this until we can shut down. Oh, the show's over. Now we can shut down. There is always that fear that I'm going to flare. Like I just finished filming a new obstacle course show. And that was, I had 2 concussions from that show. First episode, I got a concussion, second episode, but I was not diagnosed until a few days after the second episode. Or not the same episode, but second shoot day. I was surprised with all the impact that my body went through that I was waiting for ulcers or something to happen, my glands to swell, and then I was gonna fall apart. Nothing happened. I am going through like a flare right now because I've just been too much, just too much. I hired a new coach. I'm running 6 days a week. I'm training, with Ninja and all this stuff. And even though I think I'm getting enough sleep, I'm not. I'm not.
So even, once again, with autoimmune disorders, everything affects our mental health. Everything affects our mental health. And so, you would say you would be nervous or have anxiety about this might happen or when it's going to happen, when is it going to shut down? How do you cope with that anxiety of this everyday struggle of when is it going to happen again?
I think I've done a good job of, which has actually not really served me well in some ways, is suppressing, because I'm not the kind of person that will be like, wake up and be like, today's going to be a bad day, or I think I feel this and then I think about it all day. I'll forget about it. If I think I feel like an ulcer while I'm running, I'm like, forget about it, keep going.
Just like the choreography, just forget it.
Oh, forget it completely. And then you're like, I always say, like, and I said it in other interviews, like I say the whole cliche mind over matter thing, but I definitely live, I live by it. I live by it. but at the end of the day, sometimes I forget I have a disease. I think a lot of people with autoimmune diseases say that they forget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing, that you can get to a point where you're feel healthy and that you don't have something lingering over you is always a good place to be. And you mentioned you don't get enough sleep. I don't really think any American gets enough sleep. We either aren't getting enough or we're getting way too much, which is both ways unhealthy. So for you as an athlete, what is your perfect number there of hours?
I try to sleep 8 to 9 hours. And my coach we report how many hours. I mean, obviously we don't know how many hours we actually slept, but you've got the thing, like, I go to bed pretty early. If I need to wake up and run at 6 a.m., I go to bed at 9 or 9:30. And I, try to have a full restful night's sleep. That's pretty 8 to 9 is good. I know that if I don't sleep, if I have a few nights of literally less than 6 or 7 hours, I will hit a wall. It's wild. It's almost like sleep is a medication for Behçet's too.
Well, sleep is a medication for everything. I've said, and people that listen to my podcast probably have heard me say this every episode, but sleep is the dishwasher of the mind. And it washes the day away and it helps you reset. But not only that, it helps our whole body to reset and reboot. The whole process of sleep is so important. And one of the first signs, symptoms of any mental health condition is excessive sleep or not enough sleep. That's one of the main things. I have three close friends who are very, I don't know what the word, I was going to say addicted, but they're very committed, athletic people. And they go to bed like 8:15 and they're up by 3:30, 4. And I'm like, there is no reason on this earth that God wanted anybody to be awake at 3:30 or 4 in the morning. But they said, if you get up at 4, you've got a good 3 solid hours before the rest of the world wakes up and you can get a lot done. I'm like, but I don't have any interest in doing that.
I know. I mean, that's why, like, it does feel great. Usually our long training days are in the morning on Saturday morning, and we'll have run anywhere between a half marathon to 20 miles by 8 a.m. And doesn't that feel great? We're exhausted.
I'm exhausted just thinking about you doing that.
Yeah, me too. I didn't do it this morning, and I just, sent my coach a message. I was like, I'm sick.
I'll write you a doctor's note. It'll be all right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank
you.
So
you had indicated a little bit about this show that you were on, that you had received a concussion. Was there any more to that story about? I just kind of sense there might be a little more to that story as far as concerning.
There is.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. The show, we weren't wearing a helmet on the first course, the qualifiers course. I only realized that when I saw the trailer, and I was like, wow. So we were banged around a lot. And then we made it onto the next course, and that course had a lot of drops and a lot of hits. And I had one really bad snapback and a hit to the head. And after the show, some of my friends actually said they were going to bring up that I might have a concussion, because all I kept saying was, am I here? Am I alive? Because doesn't it feels a little weird. Everything sort of looked weird. Everything was just different. And then a month later, we shot the next shoot day, and that was a relay course, and it was really quick. 2 obstacles I finished, 2 obstacles my coach at the time finished. And I finished mine. I had another pretty bad hit to the head going down, and I was sort of just like, shaken in my interview, in my TV interview, waiting for him to finish. And long story short, he disappears. The obstacle stops spinning. I don't know what happened. I can't really talk about it, but there was, confidentially, there was something that happened there was a fatality previously, and it had not been addressed to any of us, but we knew it was there. So when my coach disappeared, I was sort of shocked, and I was like, where is he? Is he okay? Is he alive or is he dead? Those are my questions. Was he alive or is he dead? And there was a very short amount of time in which I didn't know and nobody was giving me answers, but there were cameras on me. And then I learned that he had fractured his ankle. The obstacle had broken his foot to his ankle in two places. And that was it. We were done. We took a 15-minute penalty and that was it. That time messed me up royally, like
So you
royally.
were standing there waiting to be interviewed, and you knew someone had passed away doing this obstacle course or at the filming?
Yes. We don't have the details, but something happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That did happen. It was second fatality. But so it was in the back of our heads when we were doing this, to the point where actually before I went on the course, I told a couple of people, I was like, take care of my dog, just in case. I didn't know, and I do these things because I don't know, I might, I can fall off a boulder any second and not be caught the right way. So I was clearly okay with it because I went ahead and did it. But the big thing that really did it for me was my coach, was because I got him into the show. I got scouted for this show. I brought him on, and he's walking away with his broken ankle, and it was really hard. And I'll tell you now that somebody had suggested tremor therapy. I don't know, what your belief system is on that. I've only done a few sessions, but it has brought back the scene to me, and I am very emotional. I'm very emotional.
So in that little period of time, it was that you didn't know what had happened. It wasn't that somebody told you this had happened or that had happened. It was the whole that you didn't know what had happened.
I didn't know. I saw a wheelchair being run. The obstacles had stopped. The water was still. They wanted me to look at the camera and do a shock, but I didn't know what I was being shocked about. And at the same time, I am wired with adrenaline because I just got, I just did some crazy obstacle, like a crazy obstacle,
Mm-hmm.
like something you don't do in your life. And so I was like, I was already like this, like they had taken, put a coat on me and all this stuff. And I was just sort of standing there, and they had the medics trying to figure out something had happened to my shoulder, which ended up being a muscle spasm thing. And it was a lot. And it wasn't until a few days afterwards that how real can we be on this show? I mean,
You say whatever your heart desires. We're here for it.
A few days later, we wanted to celebrate, because we had finished the show, even though he was going into surgery and all this stuff. And I took a little bit of shrooms. I've never done shrooms. I did like a little chocolate bit. I cried for 5 hours straight. 5 hours. I wept like a newborn child. I mean, I wailed. And it was all because I was sorry that I brought him on the show. And I was sad that we didn't, things went the way it did.
There's a lot of research right now in using psychedelics such as mushrooms for medicine to help with post-traumatic stress disorders and those kind of things. So,
and concussions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I told my concussion, she's osteocranial sacral, whatever therapist. I told her after, she was like, that might've been a good thing, that you did because afterwards my concussion symptoms were there. I mean, I became a completely different person the next day.
Yeah. So yeah. You mentioned tremor therapy. Are you talking about where you sit there and you shake?
Correct.
Naturally shake to try to get your body back into normal homeostasis?
Yeah.
Okay. And did that work for you?
I mean, I'm still doing it. The woman that I'm working with sort of explained it like I am a bottle that is shaken, and you don't want to open it all up. You got to open it, close it, open, close,
right.
Open, close. A lot of people go through it with domestic violence and traumatic. And it has helped me, if anything, just to realize that I still am not okay.
Gotcha. So what kind of symptoms do you now suffer after this accident, this trauma of standing there waiting to hear what has happened to your coach?
Well, the concussion symptoms were erratic. I had anger issue. I was punching stuff. I was driving 100 miles on the freeway. I was angry. I was listening to like heavy metal. I couldn't even drive once I formally got diagnosed. I couldn't really be on the phone or anything, I was very emotional. I still am, but I think I'm trying to like keep busy. Like I went right back into training. I took time off a little bit, like a little bit. And then when I first went to like go jump to a bar from a trampoline, I mean, I'm talking like 1 foot off the ground. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
And so did you, or do you at that point kind of feel like your career is over?
No, because I feel like it actually sort of just started because this drove me to be like, I didn't really learn some of the skills for Ninja Warrior that I wanted to learn because I didn't know what I needed to learn for the show. And I hope I'm under contract with this other show, but I hope to be able to come back to Ninja Warrior in another season. And so because of this and because of the fear, I decided to make time 2 days a week to train and get back. And I'm slowly learning. I mean, I'm doing, little bar jumps that are called laches and stuff like that. And that's helping me to get over fears of falling,
So essentially what you are doing is your own method of cognitive behavioral therapy to reintroduce yourself into this slowly, to build confidence that I'm not going to die from jumping off of this trampoline onto a bar.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for listening today. We're going to now switch over into Doc Talks DX, which you can find on Patreon. And we're going to talk about the diagnosis part that Pamela may be dealing with today, whatever that may be. You'll have to subscribe there to hear, of course. So we don't want to give all of our secrets out here, right, Pamela? We need to leave something, hold something back here.
Get on over there. Get on over there.
So she'll be joining us there to discuss the diagnosis and potential treatment of how we would bring all this together to help them cope with this mental illness. Pamela, I appreciate you sharing your story with us today. And of course, you'll join us here on the second part of Doc Talks DX. Pamela, tell us where our listeners can find you.
They can find me on Instagram at Pamdrenaline, like adrenaline with Pam. And also they can follow, I produce a show at Hollywood Beauty Awards and LATF USA. And also We Care When, which is my organization for Behçet's disease.
All right. We'll have all of her information listed in the description of this podcast. Of course, you can find me at thedocbrian.com, and all of my social media is listed on the website there as well. Make sure to follow us again over to Patreon for Doc Talks DX. Of course, Doc Talks is a part of the Be Frank Network. Again, thank you for listening, Pamela. Again, thank you for being with us on Doc Talks today.
Thanks for having me.
Have a great day.